Good evening, America. It's Monday, January 20th, 2020. It's 7 p.m., and you're watching Q News Tonight. Out of the closet and into the headlines. We are having breaking Q news about MLK. Napoleon, tell us about it.
Well, today, as we all know, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is a 3-day weekend, which we all love. However, there is a lot of significance to that day. And what we ask ourselves, what is the significance of minority groups to the LGBTQ community, in addition to, of course, minority discrimination that we have experienced in our own lives? And there's a lot of different ways that you could relate the two things. You could relate the non-mutable factors or the immutable factors of being black to being gay, because neither of them is a choice or something that you can change. You can relate the idea of Baynard Rustin, who was and organized the March on Washington, who was also gay himself. You could relate Coretta Scott King, who was alive during a little bit more of the LGBTQ rise to discrimination acts, who stated from Martin Luther King that the injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There's a lot of parallels between the two communities in terms of facing oppression and coming together as a community. So today we celebrate that as well.
I'm curious to both of you, with this being the national holiday, National MLK holiday, any kind of reflections that you think that the LGBT community specifically has about this holiday today?
Well, I think that the LGBT community has a lot in common with the human rights of African Americans, particularly African Americans in the United States of America via the Civil Rights Movement. So reflecting just on Martin Luther King Day today, really, today should be a day for service for all people, but particularly those in the LGBT community, and in realizing that we must further respect for all people and equality for all people, regardless of who you are, where you live, and who you love.
I think it's interesting that we're celebrating MLK today, and tomorrow the impeachment trial starts, and MLK's holiday for the LGBT community and our civil rights struggle. We finished how topical the impeachment process is when we had 8 years of the first black president in history, and now we've moved from that to the time that we're living in now. 2020 is certainly going to be a dramatic year for us all to watch and report on, I think. And that brings me to the fact that you're watching Q News Tonight. We are the world's first live daily gay evening news program. We're completely live and unscripted, as you're going to see tonight. Napoleon and Aaron are going to fumble over and over again. And as I'm going to tell you at the end of the show, I am likely going to fumble myself for very specific reasons. Anything can happen. It's week 3 of our broadcast, and tonight we are celebrating the National Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And Napoleon, tell us about how people can participate.
We want to make sure here at Q News Tonight that all voices are heard, all minority voices, all voices in general. And if you are part of the LGBTQ community and you appreciate what the LGBTQ community has had going on and want to hear more about it, or if you just like our LGBTQ voices as we discuss the most pertinent topics every single day, then we want to make sure that you like, subscribe, and start a watch party to everything that we do so that you can get this information to more people. We've got a video for you, so watch this.
When viewing our live show in your app, please click share. After clicking share, your screen should change and you can then click watch party. On the next screen, you can write text to your viewing audience and then click start watch party. You've done it. Enjoy your party.
And we're broadcasting to you live this evening from the World AIDS Museum and Education Center here in the heart of Wilton Manors, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or as Al likes to often say, the gayest place on planet Earth. Right. Also very important tonight to note tonight that Q News Tonight, it is part of the Happening Out television network and our sister show, It's Happening Out, which is the world's first live gay evening TV show that airs on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m.
Yeah, I hear it's the most popular thing in gay TV, so
Yes.
I want to check that out. No bias here.
All right, well, let's jump right into our headlines. Let's first move to queuing up the world. And of course, there is no other news in the world that is bigger that the impeachment trial is starting. We've prepared this news piece for you. Watch this.
Over the weekend, in a 6-page formal response to the impeachment summons, the president's legal team revealed their main arguments: that the entire process was tainted, that the articles fail on their face and on the facts, and that they were the result of a, quote, brazen and unlawful attempt to overturn the results of the 2016 election. We could get an even closer look at the president's impeachment strategy by noon today, when his team is required to submit a legal brief to the Senate.
So as you just heard, on the eve of Martin Luther King Day, tomorrow, Tuesday, we are going to be officially starting the trial of President Donald Trump in the United States Senate. It will be interesting to see how this continues to play out, because Democrats need to pull 4 Republican votes to allow witnesses to admit their testimony in regards to the alleged conversation that had occurred between President Trump and Ukrainian president some months ago in August of last year. So as this continues to play out, Trump's legal team is, of course, putting forth their legal defense and stating that the president did not commit a criminal offense, thus he should not be impeached, and the articles of impeachment at face value cannot be withheld up in a court of law. Also very important to note that if the Democrats do obtain the 4 votes needed in the United States Senate, should we see individuals like John Bolton or Lev Parnas, who happen to be an associate of the personal attorney for Donald Trump, which is Rudy Giuliani, to see if their testimony will be admitted into the United States Senate as well.
I'm curious, Aaron, what did you think of the breaking news today of the Harvard professor that's going to be on the legal team, saying that even if there was a violation here, that it's not an impeachable offense?
Well, interesting, because that individual is actually going to be referring.
His name?
I cannot remember off the top of my head, but again, he's just brand new, joining the Trump defense team, and he's going to be using an 1868 case in the impeachment against President Johnson at the time. So it should be interesting to see how that continues to play out, because he is going to use the same argument that was used then in 1868, which was saying that there was no criminal offense that had occurred. However, even within that argument, that sometimes if you are president of the United States, you might have to engage in a criminal conversation to get what you need furthered or propelled in terms of American diplomacy or policy.
One last question. What did you think about the return of the old name related to potential impeachment, and that was Ken Starr?
Well, you know, it's interesting. A lot of people are wanting to compare the impeachment of Donald Trump, ironically, to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. However, I don't personally believe that the two should be compared. If we're going to compare them in any way, I think that we can point to Ken Starr and the fact that when they moved from the House to the Senate, boxes upon boxes, documents upon documents were gathered from Ken Starr's team and admitted into evidence, into testimony. So multiple people had testified in the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. Unfortunately, at this point today, we don't see that is happening. Again, that's why it's very crucial that should the Democrats collect those 4 Republican votes that they need to allow testimony, then we can actually see that testimony be admitted into evidence and decide.
And that comes down to the constituents of every state to make sure that your awareness of what you want to have happen is heard by your senators. So if you're in Florida or any other state, then please make sure to go out there and tell your senators what you want. Do you want witnesses to be involved? Do you not want them to be involved? We've only got 1 day left to let them know.
Well, I'm glad to be back at Q News tonight. By the way, guys, both of you did a great job last week. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm going to tell America at the bottom of the show what's currently going on with me, but it's going to be a very interesting week, and I'm really glad to be here. We move out of world news into the USA, and we're going to queue up the USA now. Multiple big items in the news. for the LGBT community and related to our interest. And first off is a call on ICE to release trans detainees that has taken place over the weekend. And Napoleon, tell us about that.
That's right, everybody. There have been 44 House Democrats that have submitted a letter to the Department of Homeland Security as well as the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, that has formally asked them to release all transgender detainees that are in their custody. They have stated that the detainment has been a violation of judicial procedures that are disproportionately harmful to trans people because of evidence of rampant sexual abuse of trans inmates, as well as other reasons that relate to vulnerable sexual harassment, being in solitary confinement, being a part of hysteric assault, or even just medical neglect after they've already started or are in the process of transitioning. So there's a lot of different aspects that we have to consider with trans individuals as humans.
From a political perspective, especially with the impeachment process going on, any possibility that anything will come of this, do you think?
Well, I mean, I said it last week, and I'm going to say it every single day. Elections have consequences, and as far as the LGBT community, we need to continue to put forth candidates and policies that are inclusive towards all aspects of our community and the LGBT community, in particular the T, which is often overlooked.
All right. Well, let's continuing and queuing up USA News. And a shocking story that we are following about whether doctors can be jailed for trans surgeries. And Aaron, you're going to bring us this story.
So we touched on this actually a little bit last week, Napoleon and I. A legislative session had started around the country last week. So we are already hearing anti-LGBT bills out of states like South Dakota, Tennessee, and right here in Florida. 4 of them actually right here in Florida. And unfortunately, there's a proposal by Representative Fred Deutsch, who is a Republican representative in South Dakota, and he's proposing a bill that would make it a felony for a doctor to promote or expand any kind of surgeries towards our towards our trans brothers and sisters. Part of this also includes giving them access to hormone treatment, puberty blockers, and in doing so, this is not directly advocating for the situation at hand in Representative Deutsch's opinion, which is you're not treating transgender for someone who is transgender. In his opinion, and the opinions of others, being transgender is a psychological condition that should not be treated with a gender reassignment surgery or what have you, which of course all 3 of us at this table know that that is completely, absolutely deplorable and that is wrong. But again, this is why elections have consequences. And right here in the state of Florida, we have 4 anti-LGBT bills, one of them very similar to the South Dakota bill that would also make it a felony for doctors to perform any of outreach or healthcare services towards trans minors.
So if I understand this story correctly, this is a similar strategy to ultra-conservatives toward abortion. They don't take on abortion head on. They eliminate and peeling away the service possibilities. This is the same strategy here, as I understand it.
To a certain extent, if you want to equate it in that notion, but Representative Deutsch actually had said that this legislative session in particular, he was going to lead on issues of the transgender community based off of a gender reassignment surgery for a minor that we all know about and heard about last year in the state of Texas, and saying that if a child under the age of 18, it should be a felony to provide any kind of healthcare services.
We continue in our Queuing Up USA News and talking about MLK National Holiday, but kind of in a strange way. As we speak in Virginia, an MLK Day gun rally is underway, and we've prepared this video for you. Watch this.
Governor Ralph Northam has an entire legislative package that he's proposing. It's actually something he put before the legislature in a special session last summer in the wake of that Virginia Beach shooting, but it went nowhere because at the time the legislature was governed by Republicans. And now the Democrats are in control. The governor is putting forth this package again. And so this includes things like universal background checks, a red flag measure, also limiting citizens to 1 handgun purchase just a month, also giving greater authority to local governments to ban guns or weapons in public spaces, for instance, at protests.
So over 22,000 people have marched on the state capitol of Richmond, Virginia today to advocate for gun rights. And obviously this is in wake of opposing Democratic leadership on their proposals and policies this legislative session, which again just started, in regards to gun control measures. Democratic Governor Ralph Northam has recently declared a state of emergency because in these 22,000 individuals, it's individuals who are pro-gun, if you will, that are coming from all over the country, and they're bringing such a militia with them that it could be very concerning and pose a complete and total danger to the state of Virginia.
Thoughts on guns? We've talked about it.
I immediately go to South Park. Guns are bad, okay? I know that that's a very simple approach to it, but the reality is that how we're approaching gun conversation in our culture is not on par with what's actually happening with the actual guns themselves or with the organizations that deal with them. And that's where we have a misalignment, and that's what we have to fix in our own culture, is how to make guns a conversation that we deal with on a realistic level, not just theoretical.
Does it shock either one of you that this kind of demonstration would be done on this national holiday, that
No.
it was specifically chosen?
Today is a perfect day to do so. It is an unexpected day that's also very peaceful, and that is exactly what this protest is about.
Yeah, so it was a strategic choice.
I believe so.
Plus, everyone has the day off so they can promote what they actually want to put forward.
Yeah. Well, we continue in our news by moving into queuing up entertainment. Let's do something a little lighter. Whenever we talk about guns, lighter is better, and we're better to Netflix. Netflix has a new series, or a continued series, where it is being praised for saying the word gay. We've prepared this piece for you. Watch this.
As you guys saw, that is the show on Netflix. It's called Kipo and the Age of Wildebeests, and it is a charming animated story. It's all about, it's a DreamWorks cartoon, by the way, and it's all about teenager Kipo who is traveling along a post-apocalyptic world with her friends and encounters different animals. And the reason that this show was so enthralling to the LGBTQ community is not just that they use the word gay, but that he uses it so nonchalantly, that a character in the middle of a season that has had a little bit of LGBTQ undertones comes out and actually says, "I'm gay," in those actual words, not just alluding to it as has happened in past decades, and just uses that to kind of cut the scene. You might think in the past, in media, that this would be a revolutionary moment, but it's not. It's just a small moment, and that's what has gotten so many accolades for this show and for this moment in particular in the LGBTQ community.
Any other thoughts about, are we surprised? Should we be celebrating at this moment?
Yes,
that
I
And
legitimately
why?
cried when I watched this for the first time. It's just, I can think of how different of a person I might be if I had, and I had amazing acceptance. I grew up in an art community and with parents that loved me, but I still had society to deal with. And if I didn't have that barrier, this show would have been one of many that might have helped me to say, oh, cool, what else can I do? I'm gay, but what else is there to me? And I think that this show will inspire hundreds of thousands or millions of kids.
Wow.
I'm just shocked to find out that Napoleon's gay.
Me too, actually. Let's move out of entertainment and move into the vote of 2020. The New York Times today has endorsed a woman or women for president. We have prepared this for you. Watch this.
Just 2 weeks from today, we'll get the first results of the 2020 election when the Iowans caucus. And just ahead of that critical final stretch this morning, the New York Times is out with a big announcement. For the first time in 160 years, its editorial board is endorsing two Democratic candidates for president, Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Elizabeth Warren.
So as you just saw, very exciting news. At least it's exciting for me personally. The New York Times editorial board has just endorsed a Democratic nominee for president in 2020. 2020, because not just one woman is enough, you have to pick two. So of course they have endorsed Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and my candidate, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. And very interesting because this just comes about 2 weeks before the February 3rd Iowa caucus. So very important endorsement to note, and how this primary actually continues to change, because the polls were completely opposite last week in comparison to what they are this week. As of January 20th, so yesterday, we have in Iowa, Biden is at 24%. Warren is now at 18% after being in fourth last week. Pete Buttigieg is at 16%. Sanders is at 14% after being first last week. And Amy Klobuchar is up from 6% to 11%.
Any thoughts? Exciting that two women are. The New York Times is basically America's newspaper.
It is, yeah.
Well, New York is at the head of a lot of what's going on in our culture. And I think that is what's so exciting. As a part of the LGBTQ community or any other, if you're a part of any minority and you find that there is a say, that there is more of a platform given to other minorities or people that are just marginalized in society, it helps empower you. And that's what we're seeing right here. It's not just a single female candidate that they are endorsing, but it's two, which means that there is more of an opportunity for different people's voices to be involved. I commend them for that choice.
I think it's interesting that the editorial board at the New York Times very specifically said that they were not endorsing one woman over the other. They were endorsing both, but for different reasons. In their editorial summary, they talked about Klobuchar was the realist, Warren was the radical. And I thought it was very interesting. And it made me wonder when I was reading the editorial endorsement, if the New York Times may not be ahead of the curve in saying, like in 2016 in the Hillary Bernie Sanders debate and then the Hillary-Donald Trump debate, that they are ahead of the curve of saying maybe it is really time for a woman to be president of the United States. In other Vote 2020 news, we move to Mayor Pete. And for a completely different reason. Mayor Pete has had a dust-up with a gay bar owner this week over a dancer poll. Hank, Napoleon,
I've got this.
Tell us about that.
I'll cover this story, guys. So in Providence, Rhode Island, there was a gay nightclub that posted on social media. It was called the Dark Lady, by the way, the club. That Pete Buttigieg and his campaign were supposed to be at their location for a showing for a part of his tour. And at the last moment, Pete Buttigieg and his husband canceled their appearance for this fundraiser at the location because that location, the Dark Lady, could not remove the stripper pole. Now, the club asserts that they showed that the stripper pole, that the dancer pole was there the entire time, and that only at the last moment it was removed and that they were asked something that couldn't be asserted. They say that the event had been reported by locals and politicians and that Pete Buttigieg as an LGBTQ candidate should support LGBTQ businesses. But others say that the dancer pole might reflect poorly on the LGBTQ community by being in his campaign. So we see both sides represented, and we saw that he decided to move his event to the LGBTQ, or rather the straight establishment across the street.
I think this story is a fascinating story for the LGBTQ community, because if you want a gay president of the United States, can the president of the United States who is gay embrace everything that's involved in the culture of the gay community?
Can he be a gay president and also be involved in gay sex is really what's being determined right here, at least from my vantage point.
What if he, let me challenge that observation a little bit of a different way. What if he went to a traditional big straight bar that had stripper poles and he said, well, because you have stripper poles, I can't appear at the, in the straight bar?
I don't think you'd see that in our current administration.
Well, with our current administration, yes. But I think that this is actually the right move by the Buttigieg campaign. And had I been in Pete's shoes, I would have actually done the same thing. Because we had just, 2 weeks ago, President Trump was here for the Evangelicals for Trump Coalition event in Miami, questioning the authenticity of whether or not Mayor Pete is actually a Christian. And same people at this conference had been very vocal about their opposition of Mayor Pete, condemning him and his lifestyle, if you will, and saying that it's immoral. So when you are someone who is a public person and you are LGBT, in particular an LGBT person who holds public office or is running for office, you're held to a much different standard. So you have to continue to beat back those stereotypes that are often associated with our community.
The observation is the bullseye of why I think this story is so interesting for Q News tonight, because there is a real future understanding that we are going to have to find common ground on, not only in the gay community, but the entire community as a whole, of how do you balance our interest as we move into the more traditional markets, also and ask for acceptance. Very interesting story. We move into one final Vote 2020 story that is breaking about Mayor Bloomberg, and very appropriate today for MLK Day, because Mayor Bloomberg has said, my story might have turned out very differently if I would have been black. All stop. We've prepared this for you. Watch this.
Has been very lucky in life. I often say my story would only have been possible in America, and I think that's true. But I also know that my story would have turned out very differently if I had been black, and that more black Americans of my generation would have ended up with far more wealth had they been white. Instead, they have had to struggle to overcome great odds because their families started out further behind and were excluded from opportunities in housing and employment, education, and others.
So if there's one thing that our viewers can take from that little excerpt of the video that they just saw of former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who of course we know is running for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020, it's this, and it's two words: white privilege. That's what he was doing right there. That was using your white privilege to expose the fact that there is racial inequality in this country and that the struggle of black Americans still exists, and that they're not allotted the same rights and opportunities as other people in this country simply because the color of their skin. And I absolutely think it was wonderful that Mike Bloomberg did that.
That's true. What you're saying right now is that that word, that phrase, white privilege, that a lot of times, especially today in social media, has a lot of negative connotations, and it might imply those things, that it can be used as a power for people that do have it to actually help other people that might not be in that same camp. So just saying white privilege does not inherently mean that you are putting yourself above people, but that you can use it as a way to help and include others in our own community.
You know, Mike Bloomberg is worth $54 billion, so he can say any damn thing he wants to say and get away with it. I hear sincerity in his observation.
Absolutely.
What will today, MLK, a national holiday, what will the black community's reaction be to those white privileged words? What do you think?
Of Mayor Bloomberg? Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, Hillary Clinton very famously said this in the 2008 Democratic primary when she was running against then Senator Obama, and that what you say matters. What you have done in the past is a very good indicator of what you will do in the future. And unfortunately, as someone who lived in New York City at the time under the administration of Mike Bloomberg, he implemented some very questionable policies in regards to stop, question, and frisk that led to the very unfair racial profiling of black and Latino men in New York City. So he, of course, is apologizing for this, but local NAACP activists that were at the Greenwood Initiative today with Mayor Bloomberg had said, it's great that you're sorry now, but why couldn't you have been sorry a decade ago? And that is questioning that authenticity that, I'm glad that, better late than never. I'm glad that you came and you joined the party, but why did it take you so long to get here?
Very interesting as a story today on National Martin Luther King National Holiday. We move into queuing up business, and we frequently talk about business interest, especially as it relates to LGBTQ community. And we have an interesting story that has been breaking about how coffee can be a gay-themed advertisement. Doesn't intuitively sound true, but we've prepared this for you. Watch this.
We all love in our own little ways. We can touch and we can play. We can talk if you choose to stay. No need to hide or run away. Ooh, run away.
A makeout session between two girls is interrupted as a dad comes home in this commercial. And the twist in it, of course, as we saw, is that the dad offers the girls coffee and invites them into a formal or a family conversation to welcome the two girls and their relationship into their own family dynamic. And this was, of course, by Jacobs Douwe Egberts, which is the company organization in Belgium. And they celebrate life beyond the beverage. They put the coffee cup at the center of conversation wherever in the world it takes place. That's their slogan. And I think that that's what the beautiful moment in this is that it's a little bit of a fake out, that it seems like they're going to get caught, but instead they end up being embraced. And that's everything that we want to experience in our own community. This ad has gone viral on Twitter. They've declared that people have been in tears over it, and they've had over 4.4 million views. So congratulations for that. I know I was one of the many crying when I saw it.
Are you a coffee drinker, are you?
I'm not really a coffee drinker. I prefer Coca-Cola. I really like the caffeine. But, you know, just to piggyback off of what Napoleon's saying, I'm glad to see this because I touched on this last week even when we were discussing about the reboot of the L word. And that's that the more that you talk about LGBT people and you include them in commercials in terms of marketing and media and television, you normalize us to a wider facet of society that would have perhaps in the past demonized us. So this is it's a great step in the right direction.
Well, interesting. We'd like to watch LGBT business-related stories. Interesting you bring up the L word. We move into queuing up gay culture, and we also like to bring that at Q News Tonight. And we found out something interesting about lesbians this week in terms of polling. We found out this week that actually straight women are the most prejudiced against lesbians. Aaron, you're going to tell us a bit about that.
Yes, this was a fascinating survey to read. It included 23 countries from all over the world, and it's a study brought forth by the social psychology and personality science. And it was interesting because they really broke it down, and they said that Western countries, in particular North America, so in the United States, they found that Western countries were more accepting of LGBT people. However, the disparity amongst men and women in regards to who holds more of a prejudice or bias against lesbians actually was heterosexual women, which is really interesting because I thought immediately back to some books that I've read on the early roots of feminism and how lesbians were often not included in the suffrage movement and for the right to vote, and that struggle that continues to go on for women and girls. So, you know, it's important to know, even when reading this, and the countries that were even surveyed, there are 70 countries in the world as we speak today where it is absolutely illegal, dangerous, to be LGBT. And some of them had participated. So, of course, you know, the individuals who were the most unaccepting of gay men and lesbians, of course, were Russia and Hungary. So we have lots of work to do going in the future on this issue and acceptance.
You know, it's easy for us to speak on that. We're three self-identified men at this table that haven't actually dealt with that firsthand. And I think as much as we might empathize...
Don't make an assumption I'm gay, dude.
We've spoken about this at Gay Aspen Ski Week. And so one of the things that I know that we have no real coherence of understanding about is what people are in this situation. And so I can speculate, we can theorize what's going on here, but we really don't know what it is to be in a very marginalized gender group in the country and then see how that involves how you interact with another then even more marginalized group.
Well, and it's funny because when I was reading this too, I often think about when people talk about the rights of LGBT people who are not LGBT, I think of two distinct words that are completely polar opposite, and it's tolerance and it's acceptance.
You know, that it's such an interesting observation to this story because I don't know, I agree with you in surprise and shock, but I don't know why I was surprised and shocked, because in the black community, the harshest on black LGBT are the black community. The harshest on gay men are the masculine and especially toxic masculinity. And we find in this survey that women are the hardest on LGBT women. We don't stand up for each other, and that's what we learned in this survey. So it means we have a long, long way to go. It allows us to end the show tonight of Q News Tonight with some good news, and this is kind of strange good news. We want to show you something from the archives that we pulled. The most popular gay icon entertainer in the world is arguably, in terms of social current impact, is RuPaul. And we want to bring something out of the archives from 1983. RuPaul actually starts early in the career in a punk rock band. And in our good news, queuing up good news, we thought we'd show you a little of that. So watch this.
Where's the dress made? RuPaul and you all.
You're not really kept.
RuPaul.
It's really there?
You're a little nervous here. We're getting ready to go on.
Yeah, I haven't finished my makeup and I look so ugly. And you had to catch me now, didn't you?
Well, how are your feelings here in your debut with your band?
I'm really nervous, but that's sort of it. I'm nervous on all of them, though, you know. And it's worked so far, I think, you know. And this all wouldn't be possible if it weren't for the American Music Show, who schooled us on how to break into show business. And it was Dick Richards who founded us. So we owe it all to the American Music Show and Dick Richards.
Well, of course, the video is very raw, and we're going to continue to show you another video of RuPaul's performance. RuPaul was the lead singer in a punk rock band in Atlanta in 1983 called Wee Wee Pole. Now, fortunately for all of us, RuPaul apparently didn't have gigantic success in a punk rock band and went on to drag superstardom, literally.
A phrase he coined, I believe.
Yes, I believe he's written about it once or twice. RuPaul began original career in Atlanta and was exploratory. And the reason why we include this in Good News is from such a humble, raw beginning, which you can see in this video. Watch very closely as RuPaul performs. RuPaul said that he, RuPaul Charles, was inspired by the B-52s, and that at this time period was his inspiration. I think the good news, there's no one here at the table or listening to my voice that does not know my relationship with RuPaul Queens and RuPaul's Drag Race. A big supporter of the entire platform and the brand, but it is a real note of how change and transformation can take place. Because from these humble beginnings in 1983, who would have ever thought that the supermodel of the world was actually a hardcore punk rocker? What do y'all think about what we bring out of the archives at Q News Tonight about RuPaul?
I think that that's the kind of motivation that everyone who is, honestly, any age in the LGBTQ community or any minority community needs to see, is those early stages where you see somebody that before they've accomplished all of the things you know that they're going to accomplish, you get to see the levels of doubt, the levels of humanity, the levels of just interpersonal relationship, and it reminds you that anyone can achieve those things if you're just ready to take heed and take the reins and take focus and really put your life into that mentality and maintain it. And that's what we see here. It's the early stages of RuPaul as we know him today.
Well, can I get an amen? It's ironic that we're ending with this segment and our good news segment with RuPaul, because I had started to sit down earlier today and watch her new Netflix show, which I'm totally going to plug it for RuPaul, which is AJ and the Queen. And
can't wait.
Yes, and I find her to be absolutely, if I were to sum her up in one word, just charming. And remarkable and just amazing
and fascinating.
Wait, all these wonderful. I know,
so
but
she's charismatic.
She's just everything
unique,
that you would ever. I actually said this once on an episode of It's Happening Out when we were talking about RuPaul, and you might remember this, but RuPaul, and that's a perfect example from those humble beginnings to where she is now. RuPaul Charles is a perfect example of the American dream. You come from virtually nothing and you build yourself up through hard work, through discipline and dedication to your art, to your craft.
Challenge and change.
Challenge and change.
Yeah.
I'm so team RuPaul.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story. It's a great way to end the show. I have to tell you, and production doesn't know this, but of course production would allow me to do this. My anchor partners do not know this, but of course they would allow me to do this. This was very motivational for me and very personal. I want to thank so many people that have supported me. Last week, as many of you know, I went to the Aspen Gay Ski Week to report for Q News Tonight, and it's happening out. Very early in the week, I had a very significant accident. I have just come back from Aspen. I am currently suffering with a spinal fracture, and I have blood on my brain. And I suffered a concussion. I was helicoptered out of Aspen to Denver to a level 1 trauma center and was in a trauma center to go through evaluation. The next several months are going to be very difficult, both in terms of my spinal injury and seeing what happens there, and from the brain trauma and what happens there. I end with good news tonight because RuPaul is inspirational to me. You can change and commit, and when you commit, you can change. And so I committed to returning to the show tonight. It's going to be a very tough road for me, but I wanted to take a moment to say first to these two gentlemen, they did a great job, and I'm back to support them. I want to thank all of my friends with It's Happening Out. I want to thank a very, very good friend of mine, Chef Josie, who stepped in and helped with Happening.Fun, and as host last week for It's Happening Out, the most popular gay TV show in the world. I have a lot of friends, and one of the things that I'm very happy to say tonight, as we close Q News tonight, I found out in this last week how many friends I had. Greatly appreciated. I'm back. I'm very happy to be here, literally. It was a traumatic and scary experience, but it's going to be okay because I commit and I will change. Remember, if it's important to the LGBT community, it's important to all of us. And I'm Al Ferguson. This is my anchor partner, Aaron Darr, and Napoleon Plays. And we are Q News Tonight. We'll be here tomorrow night. Thank you. Good night.